Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a set of sources that grapple with these really subtle, pervasive experiences that profoundly shape how we feel about belonging.
Right. In our jobs, at social events.
Even just walking down the street and the sources we're pulling from, they frame this so beautifully. They call the whole topic the heavy weight of small cuts.
It's a great title.
It is. So our mission today is, well, it's pretty precise. We want to extract the core knowledge about how to identify these subtle slights, what the research calls microaggressions.
And crucially, how to respond.
Exactly. How to respond in compassionate, constructive ways when they happen to us. We're moving from just identifying the problem to sort of building a personal toolkit for the response.
I think it's vital to start with a clear definition because these aren't, overt acts of bigotry or anything like that.
No, not at all.
That's what makes them so insidious, so hard to process. The source defines them as subtle, often unintentional slights.
So things like comments, questions.
Actions, even just glances. The key is the quiet message they send, which is basically, you don't quite belong here.
You don't quite belong. That phrase, that's the real weight, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The sources really emphasize that these aren't just one-off incidents. They're these small exchanges that, like you said, can be a comment or a look.
Things that happen so fast you can barely articulate them.
Right. But when they're repeated over and over, they leave a real emotional mark. They would determine if we feel welcomed and understood, or if we feel pushed to the margins.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
We have to focus on the cumulative impact.
Right.
That's really where the damage is done.
Right.
I mean, individually, a single comment, you can often manage that or just brush it off. But the sources are clear that experiencing these moments repeatedly has this severe cumulative effect.
It's like a constant drip.
With sustained drip of low-grade emotional fatigue. That's a perfect way to put it.
So it's not just the awkwardness of the moment itself, but the long-term cost of being constantly on guard.
Right. Exactly. The psychological toll is huge. The sources point to 3 specific effects. First, they just drain your emotional energy. You're always processing, questioning, recovering.
Constantly.
Second, they create self-doubt. You start questioning your own perceptions, right? Did that really happen? Am I overreacting?
Oh, that's a big one, the self-gaslighting.
It is. And third, all of this significantly increases chronic stress, which can lead to bigger health problems down the line.
And that right there is the heavy weight of the small cuts. It's the sheer repetition that makes it so enormous. It's like a kind of psychological warfare where the person delivering the slight might not even know they're doing any damage.
And that unintentional nature is the central nuance. The action could be, benignly intended or just thoughtless.
Right.
But it still lands heavily on the heart of the person receiving it. And it fundamentally defines their sense of security in that space. And the subtlety means the receiver has to carry the burden of the slight and the burden of proving it was intentional, which is
impossible.
Almost always impossible.
Let's make this more concrete. The sources gave a couple of really good everyday examples. I think they help us see the mechanism at work, the link between the subtle action and the damaging message.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, the first scenario is what we should call the suspicion slur. The source describes a situation where a store employee starts following a young man of color while he shops. And their excuse is they're just to make sure everything is okay.
Right. And the physical act is just an employee doing their job, maybe trying to sound polite. But this is where the implied message becomes the heavyweight.
Not just the action.
No. When that employee singles out one person to follow, the message that young man receives is, well, it's unequivocally, you are suspicious, you're not trustworthy.
And the cost of that is huge. You're just trying to buy some toothpaste, and suddenly you have to manage this feeling of being seen as a criminal. It strips away your right to just exist in a public space.
Precisely. And the energy it takes to keep your composure, to finish your shopping while you're getting that message. That's the emotional drain we were just talking about.
Okay, and the second example is about professional environments.
Yeah.
This happens constantly in settings where authority is sort of visually associated with certain demographics.
Right.
It's the scenario where a professional, like a physician or a senior manager, is just instantly assumed to have a lower status role.
Like a nurse or an assistant.
Exactly.
This sends a totally different, but just as marginalizing message. You've earned your credentials, you have the job title, but the very first assumption people make is that you can't possibly be the one in charge.
So the implied message is?
It's stark. You are not expected to be in a position of authority.
What's fascinating here is how both examples show that the slight isn't really about the observation, seeing someone shopping, seeing someone at work. It's entirely about the immediate negative assumption behind the interaction. The
Yes.
person is acting like it's just an observation, but it's actually a judgment.
And that judgment is the mechanism. It connects right back to that core definition. A quiet message saying, you don't quite belong here, not in this space or not in this role. When you really unpack it, you see the weight is the dignity that gets stripped away by that assumption.
Okay, so if we understand the dynamics of the wound, the most important part of this deep dive has to be what's next, the actionable steps for self-restoration.
For healing.
Yes. And the sources are incredibly constructive on this. They don't focus on confrontation, but on responding in ways that honor your own dignity and actively restore your sense of belonging. The material lays out five really powerful strategies.
Good.
So let's dive into the first one. It's mostly internal and it's foundational. Name the experience, at least to yourself. Yeah. Why is that internal validation the first step?
Because the very nature of a microaggression is that it makes you doubt yourself. It's small enough that you might think, oh, I should just tough it out.
Sure.
The strategy says, no, you can't just bypass the hurt. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen.
I think the challenge is if you can't name it, you just internalize the confusion, right?
Right.
Which then feeds that self-doubt we mentioned.
Exactly. The validation is key to fighting that internal gaslighting. You don't have to tell anyone else right away. You just need to affirm it to yourself for clarity.
So what does that look like?
The specific affirmation they recommend is just saying internally, what happened was wrong and it affected me. That simple act of naming it is the first step toward reclaiming your emotional space. It's accepting your emotional reality as valid.
Okay. So moving to the second strategy. Once you've validated your reality, you have to actively deploy a counter-narrative. This is ground back into your worth.
Yes. This is essential for interrupting that negative message the microaggression just delivered.
This is about building that emotional shield.
It really is. If the message was, you're suspicious, this strategy provides the truth that the slight tries to deny. It shifts your internal focus away from their fleeting comment and back to your own unchanging inherent value.
So how do you do that in the moment when your heart is racing and your stress levels are rising?
The sources offer these quiet affirmations you can use instantly. The main one is, this does not reflect who I am. It's a direct contradiction.
Typical. Direct.
Very. And for people who find comfort in faith, they also mention spiritual grounding, like affirming. I am created in God's image and carry inherent worth. The goal is just to anchor yourself immediately back into a truth about your value, to refuse to let their comment define you.
I like that it frames it as proactive self-defense, not just passive coping.
Yeah.
You're consciously replacing a lie with the truth.
Precisely. And that clarity of your own worth gives you the foundation for the third strategy, which is the only one that's about responding externally. And it comes with a major caution. Set gentle boundaries when safe.
That caveat, when safe, is so critical.
It is.
You're in a vulnerable position. You might not be in a place where confrontation is smart or even possible. How do you assess safety in that moment?
That's the most nuanced part. Assessing safety means asking yourself, will responding increase my risk, physically or emotionally? Do I even have the energy for this right now?
Right.
The goal here is clarity, not confrontation. If the answer points toward risk, then the boundary can be internal. You can just choose to withhold your energy.
But if you can respond, if the environment allows for it, the source gives us some tools for that calm, clear response. It moved from internal affirmation to an external statement of fact.
Absolutely. If you feel safe, the source gives these direct, calm responses that state reality without demanding an apology. So in the professional setting, the response is just a simple correction. Actually, I'm the doctor.
No emotion, just fact.
Or in that store example, you could say, I felt uncomfortable when you followed me.
And notice the focus there, it's on the impact. I felt uncomfortable. You're stating how their action affected you, which is way less likely to make them defensive than attacking their intent.
Exactly. It lets them understand the effect without feeling attacked. You're just trying to redirect the interaction back to a place of respect without getting into an argument over what they meant to do.
Okay, strategy number 4 shifts the focus entirely. It's about community. Seek connection instead of isolation. This makes so much sense. If the microaggression says you don't belong, the immediate counter is to seek belonging.
Yes, isolation is really the victory of the slight. When you pull away, you let the message confirm itself. The silence becomes a space where that negative message just grows and grows.
So seeking connection means talking to a trusted companion, a friend, family, a faith companion. But how do you make sure that sharing the story doesn't just, re-traumatize you?
That's why the sources stress a trusted companion. The point of sharing is to get external validation and to share the burden, not just to recount the trauma. The source says sharing is critical because it actively restores a sense of belonging. It directly counteracts that original message of marginalization.
Because when someone you trust hears you and says, that's real, your feelings are valid,
It repairs the sense of reality that the microaggression tried to threaten.
and it literally pulls the weight off your shoulders. It makes the invisible visible.
It does. It shifts the burden from a secret, solitary wound to a recognized, validated experience.
Here, finally, strategy number 5. This is the ultimate act of kindness to yourself, and it should be practiced no matter what. Engage in self-compassion.
This is so important. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you would immediately give a friend in your position. When we get hurt, it's so easy to internalize it and criticize ourselves.
For not reacting better or for feeling hurt at all.
Exactly. Self-compassion is the strategy that stops that internal critic from kicking you when you're already down. It's proactive self-care. It recognizes you've been wounded and you need tending to.
So what does that internal dialogue sound like?
The source offers, anyone would feel hurt by that. I deserve care right now. It gives you permission to step back from the stress and prioritize your emotional recovery. It recognizes the injury without demanding an immediate solution.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, all 5 of these strategies, naming the hurt, grounding your worth, seeking connection, they're all about reversing the effect of the microaggression.
They are.
They're methods for honoring your dignity when some external force tries to chip away at it.
And this elevates the whole conversation. The sources even bring in the wisdom of Henri Nouwen, spiritual writer, who reminds us that beneath all our wounds, even these small cuts, there's a deeper truth, that we are the beloved.
That is a really profound connection. It reframes the response. It's not just a defensive coping mechanism. It's a deliberate, almost spiritual act of self-affirmation.
Precisely. By combining that internal work of honoring your dignity with the proactive practice of self-compassion, you can actually lighten the weight of these small cuts. You reclaim that foundational sense of belonging. The negative message just can't compete with that rooted sense of worth. It builds resilience.
That is such a powerful toolkit to carry with us. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go through your week? We've focused a lot on how to respond when we're the ones experiencing the small cut, which is vital. But the application here, it expands beyond just the self. Think about this. How might practicing this radical self-compassion for yourself, this commitment to honoring your own dignity, how might that change how you recognize and respond when you see these small cuts happening to other people?
Yeah.
What does applying this knowledge look like in the context of restoring belonging, not just for yourself, but actively restoring it for your community? Standing in the gap when you see someone else's dignity being chipped away, that's a profound question to carry forward.